Hello, folks. Richard Moore, USA GSA. I've got a video for you, and I've entitled this whole thing "My Historical Backstory." And it's featuring my famed cousin, famed photographer, photojournalist, Charles Lee Moore, entitled "I Fight with My Camera." So in short, my cousin was Charles Lee, worked for Time magazine, and 98% of all the prominent, important pictures that were taken during the civil rights movement of Dr. King and that movement were in fact taken and documented by my cousin Charles Lee. He passed away in 2011 and was credited with being one of the most important spokes in the wheel of getting the Civil Rights Bill passed. Because of his work, his journalism with Time magazine, he opened the rest of the country's eyes to the struggles in the South, crimes against humanity, abject denial of constitutional rights, and evil at its very core, evil, segregation, and hatred, etc. As a result of that, my family even split because of the deep hatred that many still had in the South, still have today, of any race other than their own. And it's alive and well still here in the dirty South. Charles Lee, like myself, from North Alabama. After his work with Time magazine, he went on to work with National Geographic and traveling the globe, giving lectures and symposiums about photography and photojournalism. In the 90s, he published a book, Powerful Days. This is New York Times bestseller, and it's still available. You can still get that on Amazon. If you hadn't looked at it or seen any of this, that you'll see a lot of familiar pictures. In just a minute, you're going to see the man behind this as he gives an interview explaining what he went through, what he saw, what he witnessed, and it's a very moving story, and I hope it is for you as well. As I came along in the family, and I spent several conversations with my cousin on the phone. He's in Northern California at this time. You have to realize in the 70s or 80s, doing what 60s and 70s, and living in Alabama, doing what he was doing, it wasn't a really hospitable place for someone like him. However, in his later years, he did move back to his home, back to North Alabama, Tuscumbia, Alabama. He wasn't born in Tuscumbia. He was actually born in a place called Hackleboro, Alabama. At any rate, as Charles Lee fought with his camera and exposed the South and the crimes against humanity, and the rest of the world got to witness this, I continue down that same path in the work that I do here at USA GSA. Not just, and I'm a different category, if you will, or the same category as Charles Lee, but my tactics and my platform is a little bit different, but it has the same goal. As I champion for the rights of all citizens, not just some citizens. Millions of Americans are being abjectly denied their constitutional and civil liberties. Constitutional rights and their civil liberties have absolutely not been just chilled, but denied. And this is happening across this country in plain sight. This is thanks in part of the Patriot Act, but this has long been in play before the Patriot Act. But now with the Patriot Act and the COPS program, the National Sheriff's Association Neighborhood Watch, this holistic approach to policing, where everyone does their part, communities across this nation, it's in every community, every city, every county, every state in the United States, where individuals, without them being told, without them being given any process or anything, are placed on a list for whatever reason. And whatever a member of the community that's part of this pathetic organization tells their leader what they're doing. They may be a whistleblower, pro-life. They might not like their religion, their marital status, their race. They're accused of being involved in crimes, and on and on and on. This program has destroyed hundreds and thousands of Americans. They're already gone. Their death's been written off as everything from accidental to suicide, natural death. Many have been imprisoned or given life sentence in insane asylums. This is all facts, ladies and gentlemen. It's no part of a conspiracy. This is all part of the deep state, the rogue deep state. And even those that support the abolishment and the outing and prosecution of those participating in the deep state believe that what they're doing is not part of it. They voted for the right president, and they feel like what they're doing is justified. And I beg to differ. And what we do here is we give voice to the voiceless, and we expose these corrupt programs. We expose what they are, who's behind it, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and who they're doing it to. This is how we fight. This is how I fight. As my cousin fought with his journalistic work, with his camera and his words, I'm doing the same thing. That is about as simple as I can make it, ladies and gentlemen. I encourage you to watch the rest of this video, please. If you're not subscribed, do subscribe. Share. I welcome your comments there below. And in the description of this video is my link tree. And that link tree will give you the links to some of the other platforms, not all of them, but some of the other platforms that we're active on. Take a stand with USA GSA by becoming a patron on Patreon. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how we take our country back. One person at a time, one community at a time, one family at a time. We've got serious problems with criminals with badges, child protective services, rogue prosecutors, judges, attorneys, and plenty of rogue state actors that all participate in this scheme of terrorizing and targeting American citizens, denying them due process, denying them any process which they may air their grievance or to challenge being targeted. What we do know is once the person is placed on that list, thanks to Homeland Security fusion centers, no matter where they go or what they do, they're constantly surveilled 24/7 until they are annihilated. That's reduced from something to nothing. I say enough's enough. If never a day goes by that I'm not fully aware of my targeting and the things that are being done to shut us down, to shut me up, and to stop what we're doing. And I'm telling you right now, this old boy's not going to shut up, sit down, back up, get quiet, or get off the gas or anything else. I'm going to keep telling the unadulterated truth. I'm going to give you the facts, the unfiltered facts, and nothing is scripted. And I'm not trying to win any favors. I'm not running for office. I'm not trying to win Mr. Popularity. What I'm doing is I'm championing for those that have absolutely lost their voice. Many that I've counseled with over the last 5 years are no longer with us. All of that weighs on me daily. And so this is our mission. And I encourage you to join us. I also encourage you, when you get that link tree, you'll see Substack. And I've written several articles. And I continue to write, describing this program, or these programs, their tactics, and the who, what, when, where, and how of these tactics. Also, stories that I've written about victims, and I continue to do that. I urge you to contact me, no matter where you are. I'm interested in hearing your story. And if there's anything that we can do here at USA GSA to help you, to bring a little sunshine or whatever it is into your life, then by all means, let me hear from you. So hang on for Charles Lee and watch this. And again, I appreciate you and God bless you.
The Civil Rights Movement was a movement to try to end discrimination for the black population who had been denied their human and civil rights for too many years. I was a witness to some very important, crucial events in history, photographing the civil rights movement in the South over a period of 7 years for my newspaper and also for Life magazine. For all journalists covering the civil rights story through the 60s, it was difficult, exhausting, and oftentimes very dangerous. For me, it was all of the above, plus troubling and emotional in a personal way, too, because I'm a Southerner, too. Pictures can absolutely make a difference. That's what photojournalism is. Strong images of historical events do have an impact on society. I was born in a very small farming town in central Alabama. The South was segregated, and we accepted without thinking about that we were accepting anything. It was a way of life. When we moved to Tuscumbia, Alabama, my dad became a Baptist minister. My father would not allow my brother or I to use the word people refer to as the N-word, just as he would say, you're not to use the word hate. I don't like hearing you say you hate someone. We had very little. So we had a simple life, but a happy life, a very happy life. My interest in photography began when I was around 14 years old. After high school, I joined the Marine Corps, and I became a Marine Corps photographer. My first job as a photojournalist was with the Montgomery Advertiser newspaper in Montgomery, Alabama. I had a lot of different assignments, for society page, sports, what have you. But I also covered news events, and some things that were happening in Alabama at that particular time involved civil rights. And my newspaper was only like 3 blocks away from the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, which was Dr. Martin Luther King's church. One day when I went to his church, and he was actually having a sermon with a church full of people, I positioned myself down front, very low to keep down under the crowd. But what I did see was this cross that was on the wall behind him in the church, behind the pulpit, and that when I would move a certain way, it could show right behind his shoulder, and I like that. It tied Dr. King together with who he was and what he did. So I moved back and forth below him, looking up at the pulpit, and framing him and the cross over his shoulder, and then waiting until I got the right expression. His oratory is powerful. He's an incredible speaker, and I really was in awe of the man. I went back to my paper and told him, I told the chief photographer at that time that, whenever there was an assignment with him, that I would like to do it if possible. After this mass meetings, gatherings, where Dr. King was speaking, he just got a big hug. I mean, I watched him when he came out, and Coretta, his wife, went up to him, and I was going to take a picture, but I didn't know she was going to kiss him on the cheek, but I was ready for it. And I like it because of the sensitivity, and he seemed to always be a little shy if she kissed him in public. And I think that's the look here. They were very close, and I really like the picture. The photograph that I had made of Dr. Martin Luther King in a black robe with his arms crossed and some papers under his arm was at the Alabama State Capitol in Montgomery. What I love about the photograph of Dr. King is the intensity of his face and the solemnness in the photograph. There was a prayer that was being said. Either he was getting ready to say the prayer, but there was a prayer involved. But I love it simply because he's in the black robe. He's very solemn looking, very prayerful, and it's been a favorite of mine, and I've heard that from many other people. I knew that this was a man who was going to make a difference. I did not know at the time that my pictures might make a difference, but I knew this man would make a difference. Not long after I had gone to work for the Montgomery Advertiser, Martin Luther King had to attend court for his friend, and I thought, well, I want to be there. I don't know what might happen, so I want to be there. And when I got there, Dr. Martin Luther King, just about the time he got there, and had gone up on the steps to go into the courtroom, and two policemen went up or were there and would not allow him to go into the courtroom, telling him that there was no extra seats, and it was kind of obvious they just did not want him to go in. And so he said, "I'll stand," and they said, "No, there's no room in there. You can't go in." And he said, "Well, then if I can't go in, I'll just stay out here until it happens." "No, you can't stand out here. You're obstructing people. There's nobody around." "Well, I'll wait here. You're under arrest." As soon as they twisted his arm behind him and started pushing him up the street, I did a series of photographs of him. I happened to be the only photographer there. Then they take him into the police booking station. I wanted to see the people with Dr. King, so I actually took a chance in dashing behind the desk, running around and going through a little floppy door and getting behind the jailer, who just didn't pay much attention to me, so I could photograph over his shoulder into the faces of Dr. King, his wife, and whoever else was there. And the picture the next day brought a lot of people into Montgomery, a lot of journalists in, because it went out over the wire. Life magazine used it, and it gave him a lot of international even publicity later on. The city editor came and grabbed me and said, "There's something, we just got a report, there's something happening right downtown Montgomery. We need to get down there. Can you go with me?" I said, "I have to, because I don't have any other photographers available, so we'll go." We started running. And so I'm running fast, and as I'm getting closer, I saw a white guy with a cap was pulling a bat out of a paper bag. He just came up and started swinging. I'm shooting with a camera as I'm running, so the picture is cocked at an angle, not intentionally, but it adds power to it. It adds drama to it. My editor said, "We've got to get this in the paper today." I actually had to leave the scene, not knowing but what a riot might break out. After I went to the darkroom and processed this film and made this print and brought it out to the city editor, I had a chance to look at it and see things I didn't see through my camera. I got a little frame, a little camera frame. I can't see all those things. I could only see there was a bat, there was a man hitting someone. there was a man, another white man with a hat on, that was hitting another black lady over the head with his fist. There's a man in the left-hand corner with a Coke bottle held in his hand just as if it's a weapon. There is another man standing by a young black man that looks like he's got something like the possibility it's a chain in his hand. On to the right again beyond that, there's another white man that has something that looks like a steel rod. It's at least a stick or a rod he's holding in two hands. I was haunted by that scene and the image and seeing all the details in there. Sometimes a photograph will show details that you don't see when the thing is happening, but it was appalling to see that. I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and when I discovered that James Meredith, with the help of U.S. Marshals, was going to be entering the University of Mississippi, and knowing that there might be a lot of serious trouble because he had been denied admission, I drove from Montgomery over to Oxford, Mississippi, to be there. Very soon after I arrived on the campus of the University of Mississippi, there were sporadic demonstrations outside. But the marshals came in, armed with tear gas, that was all, no guns, and they were forming kind of a barrier in front of the Lyceum building, which is the administration building, where the marshals were all night, and most of the violence happened in the yard and the area of the campus in front of it. I was the only photographer that was inside the building that night, and I bullied my way in because I wanted to be there. Marshals were being brought in bleeding, either with gunshots or being beaten up. It was a war zone in front of the building. So I would go out there to photograph. Cars were being burned, horns were honking from shorted out systems. It was a nightmare. Coming back into the building, then I would photograph the marshals, and the marshals sometimes bringing in other prisoners. After the night of rioting, the marshals had things pretty well under control. 28 marshals had been wounded. About 160 people, I guess, were injured, that whole night. There were around 200 people arrested. Many of them were students, and others were just outsiders that came there to riot. The U.S. Marshals escorted James Meredith into the administration building to register as a student, and that was the historical moment. Meredith went through school at the University of Mississippi and graduated, and Life magazine sent me back for the graduation. It was all very peaceful. I was able to photograph one lone black man in his graduation robe in a line of white students graduating from the University of Mississippi. James Meredith got his degree. He went to school there. But it took a fight, a legal fight. And that's the way it should be. I fight with my camera. I don't want to fight with my fists. I want to fight with my camera. But I get angry sometimes when I'm trying to be stopped. And I have now been back and have seen the growth from the seeds that were sown through a lot of terrible violence 40 years ago. And my camera is my tool, and I would rather have that be my weapon than my fists any day. We heard on the radio in the car one day that Dr. Martin Luther King was bringing his nonviolent demonstrations into Birmingham. So I said, I expect trouble. So we drove into Birmingham, and what I saw, I yelled at the reporter, Michael Durham, I said, just stop the car. You let me out, you go park, because I saw firemen that were hosing some people, and I ran over quickly and started photographing. And then I ran over into the park and I saw dogs, police dogs. I can't believe this. It was just really appalling to me. That's when I also knew that I was really happy I was there. Some people would say, God, what am I doing here? I don't want to see this. I wanted to see it, and I wanted to photograph every vicious thing that was happening because I hated seeing it. And then I saw women that refused to be arrested by the police, and the police just drug them off, by their feet or by their hands and put them in a police van. I was running other places other than the park because there were people demonstrating down in the town, but they were just running back and forth trying to get some attention. And there were many, many arrests. Women even that refused to go into a police van. Birmingham was a turning point because of the violence. If Birmingham had not happened, I do believe that not that many people would have come to the Selma March that were there. There was a day when Life magazine said, we're sending a reporter down to North Carolina to do a story on a Klan gathering. We want you to go with the reporter and to photograph this. So the Grand Dragons agreed to give an interview to the reporter at his home, and that he will take us onto the property and to this gathering. After spending some time with the Grand Dragon getting his story about the Klan, it was time to go to this evening gathering. But when I arrived out on this piece of property, what I was amazed at were all of the people came to listen to the hate that these Klansmen were preaching, especially Bobby Shelton, who go on the stage talking to the people as the Imperial Wizard. I was amazed to see how many women were in Klan robes. I had problems because I wandered around in the crowd and started getting threatened. And I actually had to tell the Grand Dragon, and so he got the word out that the people were not to beat me up or do what they kept telling me and cursing me when I was going around. They found out I was Life magazine photographer. Now, all I had at times as far as light was the light from the crosses, which was pretty bright because they had some very large crosses burning out there. So I focused on the look on the faces, the hardness, the hate that I could see. This is a photograph off the Grand Dragon of North Carolina and his wife. The way her mouth is puckered, I see hate in it. It's strange to see someone like that looks like a good Southern woman and wants to serve you lunch or something, and yet, and really realize underneath all of that, the real truth is there's hate, there's discrimination. Why would a photographer and a writer go in and give somebody like the Klan publicity? It is simply to tell the world who they are, show the world who they are. And it ended up being a very successful layout in Life magazine that introduced a lot of the public to what the Klan does, what they look like, and what they preach. When Martin Luther King organized the Selma March, the march from Selma, Alabama, to Montgomery, to the Capitol, Life magazine gave me an assignment to cover the Selma March. People from all walks of life that came down to support Martin Luther King from many places, quite a few people from Boston. And so they're gathering in Selma, Alabama, and that's Selma's on a river over there, and that's where the Edmund Pettus Bridge is that they had to cross to get on the highway to Montgomery. I happened to be that particular day with Andy Young, where Andy Young, who was one of the top aides to King, he was praying with some of the people and helping to organize, and along with Dr. King, telling the people this must be all the way from Selma to Montgomery. It must be a peaceful march, no matter what happens to us. And then the march began. They walked through the main street off Selma. There was a place where there were a lot of white guys in hard hats, and some had clubs, were standing watching them. No violence happened at that time. They marched out to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and there were policemen around that area, but they crossed the bridge, and as they got to the other side, there was a line of police with billy clubs, and as they came off the bridge, the police stopped them and told them to turn around and go back. Well, they didn't continue marching, but they didn't leave. They stayed where they were. And then the police charged. All the police charged with billy clubs and started knocking people down, and then tear gas was shot into the crowd. It was pretty violent, and I have pictures of one woman, a black woman, that had been knocked down with a billy club, and she was in pretty bad shape, and a young black girl and a young black man were helping her up. But this is what was happening. It was chaos. This ended up being known worldwide as Bloody Sunday. After Bloody Sunday, a group of college students came into Montgomery. They tried to integrate the cafeteria at the state capitol, and they were turned down. So one day they came not too far from the downtown area, and they sat in on a residential street in the center of the street, peacefully, but they did sit in the center of the street. And so the police came in, sheriff's deputies came in on horseback. I do know that one man on a horseback had a marshal's uniform on, or a police kind of uniform on. Some had clubs. One man had a cane, like a walking cane. They were in civilian clothes, but on big horses. And they beat some of these students terribly. At one point, a young man was hit over the head so badly that he was bleeding badly, and he fell down. And a woman comes running up, and I started a series of pictures of her running to help him. She's lifting him up. She's completely pulling him up because he is almost unconscious. And then she starts running with him. I'm running backwards at one point photographing when she points her finger with this angry look on her face, and she is saying, "Look what they did to him." And I continued to back up and photograph this as a sequence until they ran all the way around the corner of a house. Then I saw another white student bleeding, and what I saw that was very heart-rending, I mean, it was the face of a young black student, a woman, that was tending to him and looking at his cuts and taking a handkerchief or something and trying to stop the bleeding. And she has so much pain in her face. This young student is a well-known poet named Galway Connell, and this is what they did to him. It was a madhouse. These men seemed to be enjoying beating on these kids. When the Selma March then was organized again, it was successful. The police did not bother them because the president sent the National Guard in. They were well protected. The National Guard was in, helicopters are flying above, and they were going to make sure that the law enforcement officers of Alabama were not going to interfere in this march. So the march was on, and it was a turnaround point because so many people from everywhere came there, not just Alabama people. It was 5 days before they arrived at the Capitol. They camped out along the way, all along the way, but as they're getting closer to Montgomery, it was amazing for me to see some of the people along the road that were cheering them on and waving at them. The marchers reached Montgomery. I positioned myself up near the Capitol steps and got the angle that I thought that I might want as they're approaching. They're all, black and white, waving American flags. Not a Confederate flag to be seen. That showed unity. This was a moment of triumph for Dr. King. It was a magical time for the civil rights movement. There are different attitudes in today's South, I must say. Since I have moved back to the South and now live in northern Alabama again, traveling through today's South, I could not help but notice the obvious changes, such as integrated restaurants, motels, bus stations, schools. Much slower in changing are attitudes, because some people's attitudes will never change. But I hope and believe that the civil rights movement has helped the younger generation, and I see this happening with the people that I know, understand the need for equality and justice for all people, and that they keep working to make things better. Our young people today are the future, and I hope and pray that my photographs will help them understand that we should not be living that way ever again in this country.
Marching on to freedom land. We're marching on to freedom land. God's our strength from day to day as we walk the narrow way. We're going forward. We're going forward. One day we're going to be free.
Call me a